Welcome to our Friday demonstration. Well, it's bank holiday weekend and as I'm sure you have the same that we do, it's a really busy time for us. So we decided this week to do a pre-record for you. Okay, exactly the same as we would normally do on a live stream, it's just we're not actually live. So it doesn't change the fact that you can comment. Don't forget to like us and share us with your friends. I'll do the introductions now. So for those of you who haven't met us before, my name is Debbie. I tend to do this side of the camera, so I'll do the arrangements and everything that you see visually. And my colleague Laura, she does all the technical stuff. Today we're going to focus on upcycled containers. So with the sort of leaning towards being very eco-friendly, trying not to throw things away, trying to recycle, we've started to get together a collection of containers that we've converted into containers that you could use for arrangements. So a really good way to get the kids involved as well, because I know school holidays are coming to the end and I'm sure you've got very bored children at home. So give them an opportunity perhaps to join in. What we've done today, just to give you an idea of recycled containers, we've used some old tins. Obviously, just be a little bit aware that when they've been, when you've taken the lid off them, sometimes the edges can be a bit sharp. So if you've got children involved, just be a little bit aware of that. We've just sprayed those and added some ribbon. Also got a decorative tin here that you can actually purchase from our website. Also used an old plastic container. I think that had some kind of sweet items in it. Just sprayed that, which is more than likely known us at Triangle Nursery. I just think it had flapjack in it. Anyway, I've sprayed that with some copper spray paint and then just added some trim with the lace ribbon. All of these items, as I say, you can find on our website. Now, rather than using Oasis, because it's quite a big container, I've actually added some copper mesh into that to use as an anchor for the flowers and the foliage. And then I've also used an old, whoops, if I can find it, I've used an old yoghurt container, which I've covered with some hessian and tied with some natural twine. Again, something you probably would have thrown away, so always good to recycle. And then last, but by no means least, we've got our little jam jars. I've already pre-decorated those with this rather scrummy heart and linen ribbon. Again, you can find that on our website. And decorated the 3 different sizes of jam jar. So I guess when you're thinking about containers and what you're going to use them for, you kind of need to think about the type of event, the type of venue, whether you're going for rustic, corporate or contemporary in its kind of presentation. Bear in mind the container needs to fit the venue and the event. For example, it's no good having something like this and using your top of the range long delphiniums, because they just wouldn't work. And it's a complete waste of money to spend all that money on a huge long stem when you actually don't need it. So that is one way that buying cutely, if you know what I mean, works in your favour. So you can select the shorter stems, you can select perhaps the slightly lower grades if they're just popping them into jars. Obviously, if you're making a bridal bouquet or something along those lines, you do probably want to stick to the grade A ones and the slightly better graded flowers. But for this kind of scenario, your lower grades and your shorter stems work really well. Okay, so I'm going to start by putting something together for you. I'm just going to move this to one side and bring in my old plastic container here. So if you're thinking about a wedding possibly, copper and rose gold are very in vogue at the moment. So I've selected a few flowers that I think match quite nicely with that. So I'm just going to grab my flowers. So we've got here some Gypsophila Snowball. Now this is a extra grade one that we sell on our site. well worth paying that little bit more for the extra grade because you get much more flower per stem. So more flower per penny, if you get what I mean. We've also got two absolutely stunning white O'Hara roses here, which have the absolute best fragrance. And then got some osmanthus, and this is Cook's Pink. So I'm going to start by putting in osmanthus. Can't speak today. Osmanthus. I'm just going to split the stems up slightly and do a completely circular style arrangement. You do need to bear in mind when you're putting together your arrangement the situation. So what I mean by situation is where it's actually going to be placed. So for example, if it's something that's going to be sat on a sideboard or on a window, potentially you could then do something that's front facing. If it's going to be something that's going to be popped into the centre of a dining table, then you need to bear in mind that people are going to view it from all round, so it needs to be an all round style design. What I would also say is, do bear in mind if it is for the centre of a table, it needs to really be low enough so that people can see over. There's nothing worse than having an arrangement that blocks conversation across the table. Though I guess it does have its advantages sometimes, but not necessarily at a wedding.
Is there any particular containers that you might find have that impact, like say like a candelabra or something? How do you alleviate that issue?
So you either have to go high enough to see under or low enough to see over. If you're going quite high, ideally the container needs to be something that's on either a very narrow stem or narrow central part so that you can see through it rather than blocking that visually. So candelabras work quite well in the respect that the trunk of the candelabra is quite narrow, quite slim, so you can see through it. So yeah, that works fine. And likewise, something like a large cocktail glass or martini glass. You've got that huge container at the top where you can have a cascading arrangement, and then a very fine stem through which you can see. Quite often what happens as well is if we use a large cylinder vase or a lily vase, you can fill that with water so you can still actually then see through it. So just adding some bits of gypsophila here to this arrangement. Now I've tried to keep the colour theme going with the sort of pinks and golds. As I say, rose gold is very, very popular, very in vogue colour.
Is it quite difficult to put flowers with that rose gold colour? Or?
It is actually. It's actually quite a difficult colour to replicate because there isn't really a natural product or a natural variety of flower that is that colour tone. So you can introduce the gold colour tones. I mean, classic example here is I've used the gold spray or the rose gold copper spray paint to bring that vintagey rose gold colour scheme into the arrangement, and that's one way to establish the colour. Alternatively, you can buy some really lovely dyed foliage. The eucalyptus especially, there's a rose gold eucalyptus that's dyed. That's another way of introducing the colour. Only thing I would just say, with your dyed products, just be a little bit aware of colour transference. So it's fine for a table arrangement where nobody's really going to touch it once it's been placed. But obviously if you're using a dyed or a painted product for a bridal bouquet, just be a little bit aware that you don't want colour transference. We definitely don't want to be changing the bride's dress colour for her. So, but yeah, that's one way to bring that colour scheme into it. Now I'm just going to add my two roses.
And what rose have you got there?
This is white O'Hara, which smells absolutely amazing, just like, it's one of the sort of garden style roses. So it's multi-petaled, it has a really, really strong fragrance. Absolutely beautiful. One of my absolute favourites. So again, they're sold on our website. And there you have your little arrangement. So that's my number one. I'm just going to remove all the mess that I've made. I'm a bit renowned for making a bit of a mess. Just move that out of the way.
So just going back to that arrangement, Debs, how many stems of gypsophilia?
So I've literally used 2 stems of gyp, 2 roses, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 osmanthus. You could use sedum to replace the osmanthus, you don't have to use that. So yeah, really cheap and a cost-effective arrangement to create, especially when you think the only thing that's cost you in your container is time, really.
Perfect.
Just going to pop that to one side. Where shall I pop that? I'll pop that there. So next I'm going to use my old yoghurt container. Might just pop that one over the corner there. Okay, so yoghurt container. Just literally covered that with some of the hessian that we have, and then secured it with some natural twine. So this would lend itself more to a rustic kind of scenario. So perhaps you've got a wedding or event going on in a marquee or in a barn or a teepee, something like that. So yeah, that would lend itself to that style arrangement. Now the flowers that I'm going to use for that are some craspedia. You might know it as billy balls. I'm also going to use some Thalaspi green bell, some papaver or poppy seed heads, some mini gerbera. I've got a bit of a mix there. The orange one is bison and the gold one is bison gold. Then I've also got some Crocosmia. So as you can see, a much more autumnal feel to this arrangement, which lends itself really well to the natural hessian. And again, on this occasion, I'm going to bear in mind where I'm going to situate it. So I'd like to think that perhaps this one is going to go against a wall, so it's going to be front facing rather than all round. Now the lovely thing about using the Thalaspi green bell is it actually acts as almost a frame for your flowers. Now if you noticed, I used the copper mesh in the arrangement that I did earlier to act as a frame to place all my flowers in. On this occasion I'm going to use the Thalaspi. If I just show you exactly what I mean. I mean, you could, if you wanted to, do a little miniature hand-tied arrangement and then just pop it into the vase. But for those of you who perhaps want to get the children involved, or perhaps you've got friends helping you who aren't quite so confident in doing the arrangements, then by using something like the Thalaspi to give you a start, it helps you placing the rest of your flowers. I'm just trying to remove as many of the lower leaves as I possibly can before inserting.
So with the arrangement that you're creating, Debs, how do you know where to cut it? So for instance, how do you know how to create that visual balance and how tall above the container?
So the usual rule of thumb for an arrangement is your flowers should be 2/3 of the overall height of the arrangement. Do you know what? I think every rule is made to be broken. So for example, on that one, you've almost got a half and half style. On here, you've got a half and half scenario, and I'm going to have a very similar effect here. So half of the container and half of the flowers to give you your overall finish. It's kind of a visual thing as well. If you think that the arrangement, the container is quite tall and all your flowers are really quite low, you don't get a visual balance, if you know what I mean. It tends to look bottom heavy which is something a lot of us have problems with. Okay, moving on. Right, so yeah, so just bear in mind how it looks as well. So if it looks as if it balances, you've then got visual balance. You might not have actual balance, but that's really not that much of a problem. So yeah, just it's using your judgment really.
And as we've discussed in the past, is it about experience? So the more you do it, the more you gain an idea of what works?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that has a huge effect. Yeah, the more you do it. So what you'll find is if you've got several arrangements to put together, you'll probably find you end up, by the time you get to the 12th, 13th and 14th, you're almost doing them with your eyes closed.
I find that when I do it, I like the 10th more than the 1st.
Yeah, I do understand that. I must confess, in the floristry department, I think we think the same way. So just started off by putting the Crocosmia in first. So this really illustrates what I was saying about the Floristry. You can see how, if I turn it round, how that's helped to place the Crocosmia. If you didn't have the Floristry in there, there's no way you'd get your Crocosmia to stand up like that without some kind of support. So you can see how helpful that is. So now I'm just going to pop in my Crocosmia. So we've gone for a very delicate type of flowers here, very wispy, again, almost lending themselves to that, I guess you could almost say, the festival style, rustic, barns or marquees. They're very, very natural, almost like you've gone and picked everything from a hedgerow. And that's, to be fair, that is how the recycled containers, or upcycled containers I should say, how the upcycled containers lend themselves to a kind of a natural style arrangement rather than anything too formal.
So with the Crocosmia, you get actually quite a lot of leaf on the stem. Would you ever use any of that in the arrangements?
Yeah, you certainly can do. I'm just going to be a little bit picky on which ones I use, because I've destroyed a couple of those. Okay, so if I just show you, you can cut them and separate them. So there's no reason why you can't pop a couple of the leaves in. They add another texture and another shape. You know what my favourite saying is? You pay for it all, so you may as well use it all.
Absolutely.
You've paid for the whole stem, so if you can use it all, then do. It makes absolute sense to do that. And just popping a couple more of the leaves in. And some of those are starting to take on that lovely yellowy golden colour tone of autumn. So again, that lends itself really well to the colouring of the arrangement. I'm just going to get rid of those now. Oops. Oh, sorry about the noise, guys. Now I'm just going to add in, I'm going to turn the arrangement round so I can see from this angle where I need to do some more placements. And then I'll swing it back round again so you can see what I've done. So on this one, as far as stem counts are concerned, it's 2 stems of the Floristry, and I've used 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 stems of Crocosmia, 4 stems of the poppy seed heads, and I think it was 6 or 7 of the Crocosmia. And then now just to add the final colour definition, I'm just going to add in the gerbers. Now I haven't wired the gerbers on this occasion. You've seen me wire them hundreds of times before. these have actually been very well conditioned, so they're nice and strong and turgid.
If that wasn't the case, would you wire them for this style of arrangement, or would you leave them quite loose?
I probably wouldn't worry about wiring them, if I'm honest, simply because, as you say, with this style of arrangement, with it being very rustic, very natural looking, sometimes if you wire a gerber, the heads can look quite rigid. So I probably wouldn't.
And in this style of arrangement, would you call your Geminis your focal, or?
I would, definitely. So yeah, Geminis are definitely the focal flower. They're the most dominant colour and the most dominant shape. Then your intermediate flowers would be your Crocosmia. And finally your filler flowers would be your Floristry. And the accent flowers, I would say, would be your Crocosmia. Now I'm just going to turn that round. There we go. So you can see, again, very much a front-facing style. So completely different in style to the first one that we did. You can see how the colours work really well. So I'm just going to move that to one side. Now, just to add another touch or recognising what we've done there, perhaps something you could use maybe for the centre of a table, because it's going to be quite delicate so you'll be able to see through it, is a bottle here. So you could use empty gin bottles, they're really in vogue at the moment, or you could use empty beer bottles to create the same kind of style, using exactly the same varieties of flowers, so you've got kind of a match going on. So even though you want that rustic feel, just grab my flowers, by using the same variety of flowers, even if you're using different containers, you still get that good aesthetic balance. So it looks like it's intended that everything matches. Shall we say, a happy accident, shall we say, you create, rather than it looking too busy and too random. I'm just going to pinch the lower pieces off here. So just one piece of Floristry. It's got a broken stem there, I'm just going to remove that. Now I'm not going to waste these pieces, because I'm just going to sit those in the arrangement that I made earlier. Then starting off with the Crocosmia again. Now you can go as high or as tall as you want on this occasion. So if it's going in the centre of a table, you can see through quite happily. Whoopsie-daisy. I don't know if you noticed, but what I actually did was offered that up to the container to see where I need to cut them. So just measuring and then using your eye to guide where to cut. And again, just measuring and popping that in. And there you have it, very, very simple. So something like that could lend itself quite happily to the centre of a table.
So you've used Floristry in this example, but if you were to use, say, Gypsophilia, how many stems would you say would work well, and would you use, so for instance, going back to the rose gold example, if you use that stem, the types of flowers used in that container, what would you use to create the bottle?
I probably wouldn't go for the larger, heavier grade Gypsophilia in a bottle, to be honest, because it's quite blousy, it's quite full, it's quite frothy. I'd probably go for one of the smaller headed varieties like Starburst, which is a bit finer, a little bit more delicate, and then I'd just use that rather than the heavier one. It kind of lends itself to a little bit more slimline rather than big and frothy. So I'd probably use Starburst for something like that. One stem would be more than enough, and then a couple of accent flowers would be plenty, really. I don't think you'd need any more than that.
Would it just depend on the thickness of the neck of the bottle?
Yeah, and yes, it does. And also, if you are using, I was laughing because I was thinking we did a wedding recently for a bride who brought in numerous gin bottles. What a lovely way to have to achieve your containers to drink all that gin.
No promotions here.
No. I was laughing because there are so many different colours and so many different types of bottles. You could then potentially colour coordinate your tables. So if you wanted to, say for example, I'm not supposed to do any adverts here, but Bombay Sapphire Gin is a blue bottle, so you could do a selection of blue flowers in it, and then perhaps name your tables after the type of gin or something like that. So there are so many different ways that you can achieve that same kind of style. And beer bottles as well, we've used those quite a lot for weddings recently.
Perfect. What's the next arrangement that we're creating?
Next, I'm going to move on to my little tins. Okay, so I feel like I've focused rather a lot on weddings here today. So kind of lending a nod towards perhaps other events. So maybe you've got a christening coming up or a birthday party or something like that. So I've created these painted tins in blue and pink, and then we've got a almost, I guess you'd call this a vintage style container that actually employs both colours. So we've kind of got a bit of a mix going on there. Again, as we were saying earlier, you need to bear in mind what the event is, where it's being staged. I mean, a lot of people have sort of garden parties this time of the year, perhaps to celebrate a birthday or a christening or something like that. So this kind of style would work really well. You've not got to worry too much about the wind. If it's breezy and it knocks over a container, you've not lost anything, not broken your best crystal, because you've literally got containers that were going to be thrown away anyway. So, and going back to what I was saying when we first came on air earlier, it's something that you can do to get the kids engaged, get those making containers, and yeah, they can glue all sorts of bits and pieces on.
You can do it in advance as well, can't you? So for
Yeah,
instance,
absolutely.
if your wedding or the christening is in 3 months' time, you can do it today, for instance, to get it out of the way, and that's not one task that you can be worrying about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can. It's one good thing about making your own containers as well. You can store them until you need them. Like Laura's saying, it's not something you've got to do the night before. So, okay, so flowers I'm using for this are, excuse me while I just grab them. So, got a bit of a mix here. So, I've got some white phlox, some spray rose azure, and some sedum. It's green sedum at the moment. Later on, as the season progresses, we'll get the colours in, so we get the pinks and the burgundies. But as I say, at the moment it's still very new, so it's still green in its colouring. And I've got some gypsophila. I did have some gypsophila, where did I put that? Now I've used that up. Okay, we won't use gyp. Okay, so I'm going to start off with the sedum. Just going to move those two to one side for now. Now the lovely thing about sedum is it's got those beautiful succulent chunky stems, very vibrant looking.
If sedum wasn't in season, I know it is now, but is there anything else that you could use, say Acamilla mollis or something, to give you the same effect?
Yeah, if you wanted that kind of multi-headed top, there's Trachelium as well. That gives you the same kind of image. Trachelium, I'm trying to think of something else. Any kind of foliage would work really well, to be honest. Alchemilla mollis would work quite nicely. You've still got that nice lime green vibrancy. So just going to add some little pieces of the phlox now. I've kept the colour tones relatively neutral. So obviously we don't know if we're celebrating a young lady or a little boy here, if we're going down the christening route. So, oops. Now the phlox is beautiful at the moment. It's got a lovely fragrance as well. It's multi-headed. Yeah, it has got a lovely fragrance. So, and it lends itself to a small kind of delicate arrangement. I'm just going to add some of my roses, spray roses into that. I am slitting the stems up on these, which I'm sure you've seen me do hundreds of times before. But the reason for that is it just opens up the stem, exposes more cell structure to the water, so they can actually take the water up more readily. I'm not going to be particular in removing all of the outer guard petals on these spray roses, because I actually think, because they're that lovely green tone, they kind of blend in well with the colour scheme. So there we go, really, really simple. And just going to add the two smaller arrangements. I can move that to one side so you can actually see what I'm doing. There we go. As I say, do please just be a little bit aware of the fact that the tins can still be quite sharp. So if you have got children helping you, just make sure that they're very careful. Well, not just children, adults as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've tried quite hard to come up with some ideas on how you can get the whole family involved. Because again, it's nice when people feel like they're involved. They feel like they've had an input into the party.
Definitely. And I feel that's becoming quite popular now with weddings. So everyone's aunties and grandmas are doing the flowers. And
I know recently we've had a couple of brides who've been doing DIY wedding flowers. They're getting their bridesmaids. There seems to be a bit of a trend towards having quite a few bridesmaids again now. So getting all your bridesmaids together the night before, a couple of glasses of Prosecco, and put all your arrangements together is a really good way of breaking the ice, especially if your bridesmaids don't actually know each other. So it's a good way of getting them to meet, getting them to share a bit of a laugh, and as I say, a couple of glasses of Prosecco. It's surprising how quickly the arrangements get put together then. And again, it's nice because they've had a chance to have a bit of an input into the wedding as well. I can see how that works. Does that work okay there? Mm-hmm. Can't see from here. There you go. Really simple. Bring those in a little bit more. And keeping the colour theme going all the way through.
Perfect.
Okay, I'm just going to clear my debris away. There we go. Well, I hope we've given you some inspiration today. Just to go over the points again, bear in mind the type of container that you're using. Make sure that it's watertight. Make sure that it suits the event that you're having. If it's rustic, obviously something like that lends itself really well. If it's a little bit more formal, maybe something along those lines lends itself really well. Something like that would work in the centre of a dining table in a hotel for a wedding, whereas this probably wouldn't quite so much. These little arrangements here would work really well on a little wooden slice. Let me just move those over so you can see what I mean. Totally messing up our arrangement here, Laura.
No problem.
You see how pretty they look on a wooden slice in the centre of a table. So that would work really well for a wedding.
And with that arrangement quickly, Debs, how many stems did you use for that arrangement?
So I've used 3 stems of spray rose. And I've actually used the same spray rose as I've used there, which is Azure. I've used 2 stems of Acacia Balliana, which is this beautiful grey foliage here, part of the mimosa family. And I've used literally, I think it was just 1 stem of Gypsophila. So a really cost-effective style of arrangement to create. So yeah, 3 stems of rose, 2 stems of Acacia Balliana and 1 stem of eucalyptus.
And with those jam jars, they were actually sourced from our website. So if you don't have time, I know we're saying about Upcycled, but if you don't have time to collect all those different types of jam jars, if you're busy working in the city, then we do also sell jam jars and other different types of containers. So as you can see on Debbie's right, we've got some lovely containers, haven't we?
And also the ribbon,
beautiful ribbon,
which I absolutely love. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed watching us today. Don't forget to like us, don't forget to share us with your friends, and also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel where there are lots more tips and hints on other arrangements, other styles, other flowers that we've used, lots of inspirational ideas for events and for your home as well. And if you just want something for yourself as well. So have a fantastic weekend. Laura and I both thank you for joining us, and we'll see you very soon. Bye for now.